You're listening to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
And Gavin, we're back again.
Yes.
Looks like we got a story that I think a lot of people will probably very much remember.
I think so.
Is that true?
That's true.
And I still don't believe that this is 50 years old.
Well, you'll see.
Okay. So what are we talking about?
Right before I even get into this, I want to put it out there that this is a listener discretion advised episode.
Okay.
And I know this is a true crime podcast and we talk about murders every week, but I think this one has some very sensitive parts to it that certain people may not want to hear. So if you are sensitive to children being mistreated, this episode is not for you.
Okay.
That being said, this is part one of a two-part episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a story here, huh?
Yeah. This is David Spanbauer part one, and I call part one Sex Terrorist, which is taken from an actual newspaper headline.
Oh, really?
That is not my term. That is what the newspaper called him. David Frank Spanbauer was born January 1941. His parents were Frank and Evelyn Spanbauer. They had both been born in Oshkosh, lived there their whole lives. Frank worked as a machinist for Wisconsin Axle Division. I don't know what that is, but I know what a machinist is, so okay. Frank, the father, died in March 1956 in Oshkosh at only 44 years old. Exactly what he died of, I don't know, but his obituary said that he had been ill for 4 years, so whatever it was, he got sick young.
Yeah, and fought it for a long time, huh?
Yeah. In addition to David, Frank left behind daughters Mary Kay and Judith Ann. Evelyn would later get remarried to another man, but I don't think that happens in the time period we're talking about. David attended Oshkosh High School, but dropped out his sophomore year, which would be roughly 1957, and he began working very sporadically in the construction business. Was his dropping out related to his father dying? I'm not sure, but it does kind of time out that way. There are some indications that he may have also tried to join the Navy, but if he did, he wasn't very successful in that. In April 1958, he was driving a car with his friend Curtis Schultz as passenger. They got into a minor accident. The cars were quite damaged, but the only injury was Curtis getting a bump on his knee. This isn't important, other than the fact it's the only time he comes up in the newspaper before things go very wrong. His friend Curtis is young enough that he could very well still be alive today. I would love to hear from that person if they're willing, because knowing childhood David Spanbauer stories, I think would be
very interesting.
Very interesting, yes. So, now here we go. Are you ready for this wild roller coaster ride?
I am.
Okay. David Spanbauer is now 19 years old. I could do this the way that it played out and not tell you who the criminal is until he's caught, but I didn't, because you already know. No. So the mystery is ruined. January 4th, 1960, Spanbauer burglarizes a house in Appleton, stealing a .22 pistol. The same day, he committed a home invasion and armed robbery of Mrs. Winifred Knutson and Nina. January 12th, about a week later, Spanbauer broke into a house around 7 p.m. Oh, and this is the part. If you are sensitive, this is the part.
Okay.
January 12th, 1960, Spanbauer broke into a house around 7 p.m. and robbed a 12-year-old girl on the south side of Appleton while her mother slept in another room. The girl at first thought it was a joke, but soon gave the intruder about $75 that she knew her parents had. With a white handkerchief covering his face, he then took her out behind the garage and tried to rape her. Her clothes were partially removed, but Spanbauer fled when he heard a noise. The girl screamed and woke her mother, who called police. A doctor examined the girl and confirmed that an attempted attack took place, but luckily the worst injury seemed to be a bruise on her face. And what the doctor saw, I have no idea. Later that very same evening, he traveled to Green Bay and broke into the home of engineer Alton Cardinal at 1093 Reed Street, which is near Green Bay West High School, for people familiar with Green Bay, around 9:30 p.m. The property was a double lot with a large vegetable garden. Cardinal had an interesting history. In his youth, he worked for the Ringling Brothers Circus. He was a veteran of World War II and a friend of Bob Bennett, the commissioner of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He helped design highway projects and spent time in Arkansas working on flood control. Cardinal had known his share of tragedy already at this point in his life. Of his 3 children, 2 of them died from polio. The third child, Peter, was now 7 years old and was home in this house. Cardinal and his wife were not home, but he was out for the evening at a PTA meeting, of all places. In the house, Spanbauer found the Cardinal's niece, who is 16 years old. She was babysitting Peter. I am not going to say her name out of politeness. It is in my notes and it will be on the website, but I'm not going to say on the air. She's come forward being public about it, so it's not like I'm exposing her or something.
Or anything, yeah.
Yeah. You can find it. Like, it's not hard. I just don't want to say it on the air. While she was playing the piano, Spanbauer burst into the room, catching her completely off guard. With his gun pointed at her, Spanbauer overpowered the girl and tied her either to the piano stool or to a bed in the next room. The reports vary on this, but the bed seems to be what actually happened. With the gun pointed at her the whole time, Spanbauer even had her retrieve a knife from the kitchen for him to use on her.
Wow.
A pretty bold move. He used a chalk line found in a cupboard to tie her up. And a chalk line, I'm picturing this, like those things you snap.
Right, to make the straight line.
Make a straight line.
Wall or whatever construction thing you're doing, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, I would agree with that.
She wanted to scream, but feared that doing so would put Peter in danger. At that moment, Spanbauer probably did not know that there was another child in the house. The Cardinals returned home from their PTA meeting. At first, Alton waited in the car so he could drive his niece home, and his wife, Beatrice, went in to fetch her. Entering the house, the niece yelled out to stay back, still instinctively trying to protect others while she was being assaulted. Beatrice told Alton, and he burst in to stop the attack. Although it was too late to help his niece, Spanbauer fled and shot at Alton as he left. He was shot in the bottom of his jaw.
Ooh.
The bullet going up and lodging in his cheek. Somehow it didn't shatter any bones or hit any major arteries, but it was pretty bad in that his face swelled up for a long time and he was unable to speak for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Police set up a roadblock, but it was not successful. Asking around, police soon discovered a number of people who had witnessed young men trespassing, including one who exposed himself to 2 teenage girls through a window. None of the reports were ever matched to Spanbauer, and apparently men were often trespassing and exposing themselves in Green Bay. Which, that's kind of concerning.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, people weren't reporting it, but once they were going around asking neighbors, they're like, oh yeah, people do that all the time around here. Spanbauer later said he saw the roadblock set up moments after he passed through, so he went out of the city limits. From there, he found 2 hitchhikers. You don't got a beverage with you.
No, I don't.
I'm going to take my drink now. From there, he found 2 hitchhikers, and he gave them a ride to Kaukauna, and immediately went home to Oshkosh. That was my drinking for Kaukauna moment. Yeah. I don't know who the hitchhikers are. I wish I did. The very next night, Spanbauer broke into the Martin Kudelag house in Wauwatosa. This guy gets around. Among other things, he stole a .38 pistol. Now he had 2 pistols, or he could dump the old one to avoid police tracing the bullet.
So he's not always just breaking in to assault somebody.
No.
A lot of times he's just breaking in to obtain things, basically, from the sounds of it.
Yeah. I mean, later on, they would say that his motivation was definitely sexual. Even if there wasn't anybody home, he must have got some kind of a thrill out of that. February 1st, there's a Milwaukee burglary at the home of Mrs. Grace E. Fennell. She was home at the time, but screamed when he entered the room and fled out the front door. Which, that's all she had to do. She got away. In mid-February 1960, Spanbauer, still 19 years old, was caught in Sheboygan while Sheboygan police were looking for a suspected prowler. A car belonging to James Horn had been ransacked. The cops watched the area until they saw a man enter a strange parked car. It was Spanbauer, and he was held for carrying a concealed weapon and for petty larceny. The .38 was in his car, and several .38 shells were in his pockets. The newspaper does not say why the car was strange, why his parked car is strange. So I don't know what he was doing that made it stand out, but that is not my word. That is the report.
But it's crazy because so far you have not talked about him actually getting in any sort of trouble for any of this stuff. And it doesn't sound like he's... Like, are these things that we now know he did, but at the time they never figured out who this person was?
Yeah, we're at that point now.
Where they didn't... Most of these were just unsolved until they caught him years and years later.
No, not even years and years later, because this is January and February 1960. This is all within like a month and a half. Yeah.
I mean, the guy's been busy.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
He was brought to court almost immediately, and Spanbauer pleaded guilty to the petty larceny and concealed weapon. The judge fined him $25 for the theft and put him on probation for 1 year for having the gun. He was let go. However, the gun traced to the previous burglary where he stole it from.
Mm-hmm.
So even though he was let go, he was immediately rearrested and brought down to Milwaukee County because pretty much he was now the prime suspect in that burglary. He was questioned in Milwaukee by Police Chief Walter Hendricks of Appleton, among other people, and Spanbauer admitted to the attempted rape of a 12-year-old Appleton girl and the rape of a 16-year-old babysitter in Green Bay. Hendricks told the press that Spanbauer was an apparent aggravated sex deviant. When confronted with evidence of the various burglaries, he at first denied things, but after a lie detector test threw up his hands and confessed everything to the district attorney. February 24th, 1960, so this is still, all within this time frame. Spanbauer agreed to have all the charges from the various counties, Winnebago, Milwaukee, Brown, all these different places.
Yeah.
He agreed to have them lumped together with a trial to be held in Green Bay, which I don't know how common that is, but apparently that's a thing you can do. Mm-hmm. Instead of just having him bounce around the state, let's just have them all tried in one place, which technically you can do, I guess, because even though, you're arrested and tried in a specific county, like there's state charges.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why you couldn't do that. It's just, you never really hear about that.
Yeah.
He waived his right to an attorney, he waived his right to a pretrial hearing, and he pleaded guilty on all counts. He did say, however, that the shooting of Cardinal was an accident. Judge Donald Gleason bound Spanbauer over for trial and held him on $6,000 bond, which sounds really low. He told the district attorney, "Because of the importance of this case, I will give it priority over others on the calendar." Indeed, he was able to set up trial only 5 days out. It's a pretty fast turnaround. And that, I have a little note to myself here where I'm like, that's great that they got him in 5 days, but I wonder what happens for things that were already on the calendar. Like, you just got to start
push it off or what?
Well, I assume, but like, what do you do? Like, if you know that you have to go to trial next week, and then all of a sudden, like, your case gets bumped, that could be a major inconvenience.
Yeah, but I mean, that's got to be pretty common because you think about it. If there's a case right before your case and that case ends up going long, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I bet you if you do get called in for a case, like a lot of times it gets delayed and things like that because of just exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, then maybe it's not so bad. It just sounds really, Really inconvenient to have to do that, but either way. So between the arrest, him pleading guilty, and then going to trial, and it's going to be a very quick trial because he pleaded guilty. Mm-hmm. Patrolman Clarence Colby of Sheboygan was honored by the National Police Officers Association for his vigilance. He was the one who had caught Spanbauer prowling in Sheboygan. They made a big deal out of this. And indeed, I got to give him credit. Because, like, guy going around, like, kind of like peeking into cars and stuff, that's pretty minor. Mm-hmm. But him actually following up and trying to stop this guy made a big frickin' difference.
Yeah.
Because clearly you give him another week or two, like, not locked up, and he's not going to stop this.
Yeah.
So,
and it wasn't like he was doing this stuff slowly, man.
No.
Like, I think a couple times you talked about 2 instances in a day.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he was very busy. February 29th, Leap Day, Judge Gleason sentenced Spanbauer to 80 years in prison.
Wow.
For 8 of his various crimes, with a potential 45 more years that could be tacked on depending on the outcome of exams they were going to put him through. The newspaper said that the court records they had dated back to 1904, and this was the strongest punishment in county history.
Holy crap.
Gleason had given out the maximum on each count. He said his sentence was not affected by passion or prejudice, but sound principles of criminal law, and he would let the punishment fit the crime. Gleason said the community would not tolerate the vicious nature of Spanbauer's revolting actions. By that afternoon, Spanbauer was driven to Waupun by the sheriff, undersheriff, and a deputy to ensure maximum security during the ride. Under Wisconsin's sex deviant law at the time, Spanbauer would go through 60 days of physical, mental, and social tests. If found to be a sex deviant, he could get additional time, and it could affect his chances of parole. During sentencing, in addition to the stiff prison time, Judge Gleason declared that he personally opposed any form of parole and said that doing so would be attended by great danger.
Wow, this guy really was not impressed with him, huh?
Yeah, this judge was pissed. And he was brought to the state psychiatric hospital, given various tests. I don't know what those tests are, but given various tests, and he was declared a sex deviant.
So then he ends up getting...
I'm pretty sure we don't use that term anymore, but that's what they called him.
So he had 80 years. They found him to be a sex deviant. Do you know what was added on? Because you said that if he got that, he could get more time. Is that correct?
Yeah, he could have got up to 45 more, but I don't know exactly how much they added.
And that took away his opportunity for parole, or just made
it would just make it harder.
It just made it harder.
It would just make it harder. It would like count against him at parole hearings and stuff. It didn't revoke it or anything.
So, but I mean, since we have a part 2 to this, obviously he ends up getting out at some point in time, correct?
Yes.
So, and is that when because what you just covered is not in the era that I'm familiar with.
Correct.
But I do remember a Spanbauer thing when I was a kid. So this is after he gets out. This is basically part 2. Is that?
Well, I don't know how much I want to give away, but part 2 is even before the part you remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So this guy's literally a monster.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like,
oh, yeah.
Like, because, I mean, this wasn't, I mean, he started in the 60s.
Yeah, I don't think I'm giving anything too much away here, because if you don't know the name David Spanbauer, I mean, I don't hold that against you. You shouldn't. He shouldn't really be remembered. But he's well known because he technically qualifies. Some people will consider him to be one of Wisconsin's serial killers. And you'll notice at this point in our story, nobody is killed.
Yes.
So he's not done.
He's not done it by any means.
Yeah.
So I guess, can you give us so part 2 starts, I assume part 2 starts of him getting out of prison.
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us how long did he actually spend in prison? before he gets...
I don't want to give that away because that's going to be part of the story, but it's not long.
Really?
It's not long.
Interesting.
It's like ridiculously, embarrassingly short how much prison time he had.
So wow. I'm... You're really doing a good job of building up part two because it's like okay, so the judge was brutally hard on him. And we can argue whether that's warranted, but it seems like this was an extreme sentencing for it, and for him to do such little time is weird.
Yeah. And what your offhand remark there, like I was actually going to comment on that. Generally speaking, I don't favor very long sentences. I don't think that's helpful to the person, and I don't think it's helpful to society. I think that this may be an exception to that because this guy is clearly a problem. You do not want him loose.
And it sounds like I'm venturing a guess that in part two he gets out and he doesn't even take a break. He just picks up right where he left off and continues going. So,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, generally I'm of the opinion that a long sentence, it's not helpful. I mean, it's setting them behind. And, obviously I get people are like, well, they're a criminal, screw them. But still, like it's putting them behind. They're going to get out. They're not going to adjust as well. They're not going to find employment and housing as well. And it's going to end up being a bigger burden on society down the road. That's my view. But this would be a clear exception to that. Because if he does this much damage in 45 days, you do not want him out. This is not like oops, I made a childhood mistake.
Or you need to give him significant time to learn from, to get over the mistakes he made.
Yeah.
But like if he goes in 2 years is not going to be enough to adjust him from realizing that he doesn't want that lifestyle anymore, which obviously it was. Well, I don't know if that's how long it was, but
it's longer than 2 years.
Okay, good.
It's longer than 2 years, but it's not long.
So, all right. Well, this is really opening my eyes because apparently with this story, I knew about a chicken nugget worth of it because I would never have imagined this guy started in 1960.
Oh yeah. You're not alone. You're not alone on that. So I can give that away. Like, again, for people listening at home, like to give away our ages here.
Yeah.
We're both in our early 40s, so we're remembering things from like the late 80s, early 90s, significantly later than the 60s.
Yes.
And this guy's still doing crap.
And what's so creepy about it is what I remember happening then is eerily similar to what you just talked about him doing in the 60s. It's not that much of a difference.
No, it's very similar. In fact, it gets worse, but it's very similar in how he does things. We'll get there next time, but it got major headlines in our area because obviously, like, he's doing this all over Northeast Wisconsin, so he's going to get headlines no matter what. But the thing that got him in trouble in our timeline happened in Combined Locks.
Okay, that's what I thought it was Little Chute, but yeah. But I remember the guy he was caught in Little Chute, if I remember right. Somebody physically tackled him. Yeah, tackled him and called the cops, and that's how they brought him down.
So now we've given away, but that really doesn't give away the next part because there's a lot more to it.
So.
No, I just wanted to mention Alton Cardinal, the guy who was shot in the face. He lived up through 2006. He was 93 years old. So he actually lived a very long life for a guy who got shot in the face.
Did he have, like, was it apparent that he had gotten shot in the face? Or, like you said, he couldn't talk for a long time, but did it eventually become just
He definitely recovered, but, that's some facial scarring you're going to be stuck with. Yeah, he lived to be 93, and he was a very prominent person, like on top of being like an engineer and all this other things that he's professionally very good at. He was also very passionate about his church. And he would put together gifts for people as part of the ministry, not just like going out saying, hey, come to our church, but actually doing good works for people. It used to be that foreign sailors would come into the port of Green Bay and they'd have nowhere to be for Christmas, so they'd take them in for Christmas and give them Christmas dinner and stuff like that. He'd go to the Brown County Jail, and he would donate books to them, read to them who could not read. So, like, very active guy. Like, this did not make him disillusioned with humanity. He just kept giving back. And then the niece, again, whose name I will not say, but the niece ended up marrying and raising a family. She went on to volunteer at a rape crisis center, and she pushed for truth in sentencing laws in the 1990s. And truth in sentencing, there's some flaws in that as well. Like, that's a debatable topic. But basically, like, from her point of view, truth in sentencing is like when somebody gets sentenced, that means something. And you can see why she would care about that. When you tell the guy that I'm giving you 80 years and you don't get half of that, yeah, that's
not okay.
That's not okay. So, so she, not in any way to say what happened was okay, because it's not. But she turned it around and actually made something, out of it, and really pushed for improvements.
And I think that's amazing, because the more and more I do podcasts like these true crime podcasts, I learn things like that the people that have a lot of these things happen to them, they're the people that are driving the movement to, help people through these things and stuff like that. Yeah. And I think that's a great thing that, even though they experience this traumatic thing in their life, it doesn't make them cower away from it, but rather they want to be there to help the next person that goes through that same tragic thing.
Yeah. I think it's great. Like, those are the most strong, most just amazing people, because, and not to judge people who don't. I mean, everybody's different and everybody responds to tragedy different. But I would think, your natural instinct is just to cower and
ignore
back
that
away.
It ever happened, or try to erase it from your memory and stuff. And there's so many people that know, they embrace it and they say, I'm going to help people that are experiencing the same thing.
Yeah,
and
so
that's really powerful.
Great credit to both the uncle and the niece for going out and trying to improve their communities. So yeah, so a little positive edge there.
Yeah. So all right, well. Are we
That's
done?
It.
Okay.
Yes.
So, all right. With that, keep in mind this is part 1 of 2 of this. So make sure to come back in 2 weeks and check the next episode out, and we will see you then. Yep. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.